interest is suicide bombers.
Okay.
And I guess what tied into this is sort of anger. What do you think motivates a person to do that?
Well,
we've been looking at that for a while.
Anger, need for revenge, desperation. Okay, we used to think the suicide bombers were individuals who were really sort of weird and weak, and they were social misfits and outcasts, and they didn't belong to any group. That turned out to be an absolutely untrue statement. Most of them, even the ones coming from the Palestinian group, are leaders more than they are followers. They're the
suiciders are more leaders.
Yeah, they're the individuals who say it's time we take control and we do something about it. Okay. It wasn't the outcast. It wasn't the mentally ill person. And when you go...
So they're fairly well-adjusted guys.
They almost have to be by definition. See, if they were mentally maladjusted, they wouldn't be able to accomplish their mission. They would blow it. So actually, these are very well-adjusted people. No sign of psychopathology in any study ever conducted.
Wow.
We thought they were always lower class, okay? I mean, lower socioeconomic class. And a lot of them, especially in the Gaza Strip, were, because the entire Gaza Strip is...
pretty poor.
Pretty poor.
Yeah.
Only to find out some of the principal participants as shaheeds and that were people who were highly educated. Of course, a lot of them couldn't get jobs even if they were educated. Had university educations. Were middle class. But they were saying, we got to do something. We're at a loss. And they took it on their own to... say this is what has to be done. Now, there is a breakdown.
They're thinking about where we as a society are at a loss politically.
Yeah, and someone's got to do something. And it's always, if you think about it, it's always been the educated, the middle-class people that came up with this, wait a minute, words haven't worked. What strategy are we going to take?
Talking about the revolutionaries like Lenin and...
Yeah, Lenin. We talk about any of our early politicians, too. Go back to Davy Crockett and the Alamo and all that kind of thinking there. It wasn't the...
Davy Crockett was... What was his background?
He was a hunter.
Yeah.
And but he was also became a politician.
Right. Tennessee. Jim
Houston. He was a diplomat or a statesman.
Okay.
You know, you look through all the ranks of these people. These weren't the dummies. These weren't the uneducated. These are the ones who said, someone's got to do this. And that's what we're finding now in a changing picture. Now, you do have the one segment that, you know, are definitely programmed much like a cult would be, where, you know, they wear the headband. They're raising an entire generation to think in those terms. You know, they dress little kids in the little green...
To be blind, obedient soldiers.
And that's the status symbol now. You know, the picture... I found out they even have some trading cards coming out with the pictures of the...
Oh, like baseball cards.
Yeah, baseball cards.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And... so that's going to be a whole different generation now. I mean, these are ones indoctrinated to be, in effect, kamikazes. And they've known nothing else. I guess much like the Spartans who were, you know, go to battle to die.
Yeah.
But you do your best to win before you die. And that's how this new generation is being raised, because they have no other idols.
Go out in the place of glory.
Yeah, but the ones that caught our attention with the you know, at the beginning in in Lebanon, moving through to Iraq. Well, Iraq is getting a lot of Al-Qaeda bombers, but that's a different group coming from Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, how so?
Because they have isolated individuals who have this blind loyalty to a certain cause. I mean, it's not as if they're selecting on the basis of their thinking ability and their education. They're picking individuals who have regressed down to this group mentality and group reinforcement.
Okay.
I often use the training and the backgrounds of a lot of the older Marines. Okay, I was in the Marine Corps. And the training was all camaraderie. I remember in one of the trainings, they blew the whistle, and you were to attack a machine gun nest. Now, I remember thinking...
Run at it.
Yeah, run at it. You know, in the hopes that 5 or 6 of you would make it to blow it away. And this was in training now. And I remember thinking... This was the first time I was exposed to that. This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I'd rather sneak around the side and ambush them, you know. But there was the whistle, and that's how the Marines were supposed to fight.
Just like in Gallipoli, you know, you've probably seen that film.
I don't believe I've seen that.
Oh, well, you know, the Dardanelles, you know, you had the waves of human attackers and trying to take out their guns, running at them.
And then they had their ideological indoctrinations. I recall, you know, the sayings when a Marine goes to heaven, He just identifies himself as a Marine, and St. Peter will know he served his time in hell.
Oh, really?
So he lets him in immediately, okay?
Oh.
Marines are meant to die. Civilians are meant to live. And that was...
It's like what you said about the Spartans.
Yeah, same with the Spartans. So there was a generation. I mean, now the Marines are trained differently. They think differently.
Yeah.
I don't remember what general it was that said it, but he said, a dead soldier is no good. It's got to be a live soldier that does the killing, okay? So don't go in to die, go in to live. So the ground rules changed with the training and all that, but there was an age when you blew the whistle and the Marines went in.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why they became legendary as a fighting force, because...
From the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli.
Yeah, called devil dogs because nothing stopped them. But that charge was predicated on every one of them accepting the fact they were going to die right there. So I don't see the difference in this young generation growing up to be that kind of war front. Yeah, someone's got to dissuade them from this whole global jihad concept, that this is not global jihad. You are being lied to about that. So that even though that's your mentality, that you'll die for a good cause, you're dying for the wrong cause.
How do you do that?
You've got to get, in my opinion, you've got to get the average, in this case, average Muslim involved. The non-militant, non-fundamentalist.
More moderate.
The more moderate.
In the schools.
And they've got to take an active role. You can't just be sitting there saying, oh, this is wrong.
Terrible, yeah.
The Quran says you're going to hell.
Yeah.
No, they got to get up there at the pulpit. They got to go on television. They got to make an active movement to allow the masses.
None of this jihad stuff.
This is absurd.
Yeah.
I see no place in which the justification of some of these suicide bombers can be called a jihad. I mean, first of all, the suicide bombers in Israel, I don't know if they would call themselves jihadists. If they wanted to call themselves nationalists who are willing to die for a cause, let them. But as soon as they throw the word jihadist in, or holy jihad, it's hypocritical, because there is no holy war taking place there. It's a territorial war. And they're making the individuals that are being indoctrinated at that one plane believe this is a holy war, a holy involvement.
Well, we've got the group called Palestinian Islamic Jihad.
Palestinian Islamic Jihad, by the very word. See, they're trying to introduce the religious concept into it. This is why bin Laden brought in some of his jihadists to twist it from a nationalistic... Actually, I think it was bin Laden that initially reacted to the Palestinians, because it was a nationalist battle, not an Islamic battle.
Yeah.
And
it was pretty low on his list of early on.
Sure, it was, because it had nothing to do with Islam.
Yeah.
And now the strategy is to get the two confused, so that you believe you're going to go to Allah and give your 72 virgins. Yeah. Well, you're not going anywhere, because the Quran also says, I'm going to mispronounce this, Istisha, correct?
You mean martyrdom?
Yeah.
Yeah, Istisha, yeah.
But suicide for oneself, for pain or that, there's a separate term for martyrdom, dying in the name of Allah.
Yeah.
And then there's another term for suicide.
Oh, yeah, suicide is intihar,
Yeah.
Okay.
You read the Quran, you can't commit suicide.
Yeah.
Now they've twisted that motivation for the suicide from a nationalistic kind of thing or self-glory into the belief that this is Allah's will. And that's where I think the...
part of the battle.
Yeah, that you have to get the people off their butts. Yeah. And they have to sell what Islam really is. Yeah. Not what is being shown.
A more moderate. Now, you also mentioned revenge sort of as a motivating factor for suiciders. Now,
especially among females. The female bombers are almost never ideologically motivated by religion.
Yeah.
Okay? They just kill because they want revenge.
Against whom?
The people that killed their friend, for example. People that killed their husband.
Right.
Now the woman's widowed with no future, basically. The woman who says, you guys are doing this all wrong. They're cutting you off. They're detecting you, but they'll never suspect the woman. I'm going to give my life for this.
But she's avenging somebody.
Yeah, the woman I'm thinking of, who was the first female suicide bomber in the Middle East, and I'm blocking on her name. Yeah. I won't try to resurrect it. Yeah. Her best friend was killed, and she realized there was nothing that anyone was doing that was doing anything.
There haven't been too many women.
Well,
just a handful, or maybe
not in the Middle East. In Sri Lanka, 40% are female.
Really,
40 to 50%.
Wow.
Chechnya, 50% 40 to 50%.
A lot of suiciders in Chechnya too, huh?
Oh, yeah. Wow. Oh, yeah. And a lot of female. Now, in Chechnya, you're coerced into, you participate or they'll kill your family or something like that.
They hold your family hostage.
And, but, the Tamil Tigers, they recruit.
Wow. Didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Didn't know that. Well, I brought up revenge that you brought up for the motivation of suicide bombers. Because I'm thinking about in the Arab world has this notion. For 1,000 years they've been blaming. When Islam started, the Arab world rose. In ascendancy and in prestige and power in the world. And so there was this. There's this notion that among Arabs, particularly Muslim Arabs, but a lot of Christian Arabs, have bought into it too. That we are God's chosen people. The Quran was brought down in Arabic. Arabic is the best language, because it was God's last message, His perfected message. And it's so true that God gave His beneficence on Arabs with Islam, with the advent of Islam. And, for several hundred years, the Arab Islamic Empire was at the top of the world.
Right.
But then it, started sinking. And for 1,000 years, Arabs have been blaming the Mongols, the Europeans, the Turks, the Persians, British, French, and now it's America, Jews, and Israel for their decline. Could that be a source of, and the thinking is that they're intentionally keeping us down because they're jealous of our religion, they're jealous of our language, they're jealous of our superiority, but, at the same time realizing that, that their world has declined so much. How does that play into, how is that as a motivating factor for people? If somebody thinks that way, that those outsiders, they're to blame for our backwardness, and they're intentionally keeping us down, so we got to get them back.
I would have to say that motivation would play a role only as a historical kind of stage to set. 1,000 Years of Hate, I think, is one of the books.
Oh, yeah? There's a book called 1,000 Years of Hate?
Mm-hmm. Maybe it's 1,000 Years to Hate.
Huh.
I can give you the name of the author, give you a call on that.
Wow.
I don't believe the average, Muslim, categorize that, is aware of what took place historically, except for the indifferent kind of way that you would if you read something. My students, for example, the Gulf War is becoming just dust in there.
I saw that the other day with the movie. A lot of questions you asked.
Right. Much less the Holocaust. That just doesn't mean anything. It's just a word. The grandeur of the Arabic world can't be disputed. They came up and translated all of these books from the Romans and the Greeks into Arabic, or not books, but works, and that's all that was left after. It was a grand kingdom. So you could look in the history, and you could see the Crusaders come in. They're going to reclaim their land, and let's kill a few Russians up here while we're at it, and it was wanton destruction. Mongols, but I don't believe that's a motivating factor for anyone today.
No?
I think it would be a justification that a historian might draw upon.
It's very much part of the popular culture. It is, there is this feeling among most, I can't pin down a percentage, but the feeling that, we're backward, but it's not our fault. It's those others that have done this to us for, this and that and all these...
Okay, I can accept that they may feel that, but as a motivation to kill us because of what our ancestors did, is, I think, sort of stretching that.
But they're also saying it's not your ancestors that did it, but you're doing it to us now. You're keeping us down intentionally.
That I can accept. Okay, I'm now trying to separate that component out from, and all these 1,000 years, and when we had this great country of Persian and Babylonia and mathematics.
But history's alive there. It's not like history is bunk, like Coolidge said here, but history is very heavy, weighs heavily on people's.
It does.
Minds and lives.
But I would ask them, well, then why aren't you doing anything about it now? But that's where their answer. Because you've kept us suppressed.
Yeah,
I would find to be legitimate.
Okay.
You follow? I would not accept that. I hate you guys because you obliterated our culture 1,000 years ago. But I might accept I hate you guys because
you're still doing it.
You still appear as if you're trying to doing it. See, we support Israel. Okay, does that have an influence on the ability to suppress the Palestinians? Of course.
What does a person do with that? With the notion that your people are still keeping me down.
Well, that's where it was interesting when I went there and talked to them after the Persian Gulf War.
Yeah.
That we learned it's not the American people. The American people seem to be quite nice. It's the politicians in your political system that's messed up.
But, keeping 9/11 in mind, looking at that picture, that's the idea was, we'll bring down your society, humiliate you like we've been humiliated. And, then we can get ours, we can get what's rightfully ours again.
Well, that may have been an expressed motive, but the new data that's coming in is saying there may have been another motive for that.
Yeah.
And that was that Osama bin Laden wanted to drag Bush into an attack on Afghanistan to bring the American war to an Arab country, not to defend the Arab country from anything, but as an attack on the Islamic world, so he could claim Islamic jihad.
So there's a war against Islam.
Yes.
A lot of people, there's an alternative interpretation saying that, bin Laden, and same with Saddam, they didn't think America had the stomach for it, that America would be a paper tiger just as it has been for the last 20 years.
And so they just attacked and didn't expect retaliation.
Yeah, didn't expect it. And, Saddam is, same thing with Kuwait, and now, saying that Americans don't have the stomach for tens of thousands of body bags.
I accept that was the thinking. I'm bringing up the stuff, some new information that I've recently come across that says this was pre-planned and supported by some documentation.
Like what?
Well, that'll have to get and filter through, and I'll send you the documentation. I don't have it stored in my head because that they needed a way to drag Bush into a confrontation that would justify a call to jihad.
Well, what do you think? So weighing all the information that you've had.
Well, for example, the interactions that Muhammad Atta had with bin Laden strongly point to that suggestion that Muhammad Atta ostensibly worked sort of on his own in terms of organizing some things. But unlike what was first presented, where first initially it was bin Laden wasn't involved, but he certainly praises these martyrs, to, bin Laden was involved, but only to the extent of financing, to bin Laden is involved or was involved and told specifically
what to do.
Yeah, Muhammad, what to do, which targets to hit. I forget the other target that was lined up, but they ruled in favor of the Twin Towers over another target.
Oh, really? There was another target?
Yeah, but before I commit myself to that, let me review these things. I'll send you copies of the transcripts. You'll find it quite interesting.
Transcripts of interrogations with guys that have been captured?
Memorandums and things that they found on laptops in the past, and letters written that change the entire interpretation of events that have taken place.
And what's your synthesis of all this? What do you think was the motivation?
I think it was to draw us into
and to make it look like a war against Islam.
Yeah. So, and in one way, the administration's decision to go into Iraq may have defeated us, because after the Twin Towers, we had the support of most of the Arab countries and the Muslim countries. That, my God, who could do something like this? But we lost it after we went into Iraq in 2003, because now we stepped over that line of, purged the Afghanistan of the people who would do this to innocent people. And I believe it was accepted by most of the Muslims that this was an unacceptable kind of retaliation for whatever reason. 1,000 years of suppression, hatred.
9/11,
Yeah, 9/11. And they accepted this violates all the tenets of the Quran. And so we had this support.
There was only one leader who applauded it, and that was Saddam.
That was Saddam.
Yeah. He's the only one who applauded it. Made movies about him.
Well, see, that's what I mean. There was a justification in the normal, average Muslim's religion to say that 9/11 attack was totally inappropriate, done by a bunch of fanatics.
Yeah.
And I think had somehow we never, if this couldn't have happened, but never went into Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda would have died a quiet death, because they wouldn't have had the backing coming from all sides.
You think if we hadn't gone to Afghanistan, bin Laden's group would have died off
I'm sorry, if we didn't go into Iraq.
Okay.
Yeah, there just wouldn't have been the hostility and the backing that he experienced after.
Actually, that reminds me, 9/11, a lot of people, my theory is that, 9/11, let me just run this by you and see what you think. In line with this notion that we're going to get them back. You're saying it's not, that may not have been the motivation. But that sort of unleashed, a lot of people did support 9/11, and that sort of unleashed, sort of like a hurrah moment, hooray, right. Let's go get them.
Yeah.
How does that play psychologically? If you to a person, to a people who think, these guys have been keeping us down, and let's go get them. What does a moment like 9/11 do for them?
Oh, probably to show the most untenable example, but it happened. Cleveland Clinic physician, while he was on duty, dressed in his white lab coat.
Yeah.
When he saw the planes right in the tower, he cheered right there in the corridor.
Wow.
And the entire corridor of professionals looked at him.
Yeah.
Of course, his employment was terminated that day.
Right.
But there's a man whose enthusiasm broke through.
Okay, and that's a guy here in Cleveland, working at the Cleveland Clinic.
That's right.
So in the Arab world, where this feeling is very palpable, it's part of the education and part of the religion, part of the culture. What does that do for people? When they see, America get hit hard like that.
It gives them a hope for some sort of revenge. Some sort of payback, especially among the Palestinians, where you saw all the cheering taking place.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that much around the other Arab countries, except for the ones the cameras focused on, meaning that there was a bias in terms of what was covered. But gave them a belief that, there was a final payback. And here again, we come down to the people versus the politicians.
Yeah.
There's many Americans who are asking, why are we blindly supporting Israel? Give us a reason. And the reasons, sometimes don't pan out to be tenable if you think about them enough. And I think even our politicians, our high-ranking politicians, recognize the inequity of the Israeli-Palestinian support there.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have tolerated some of the civil rights abuses that took place there had they occurred in our South, years ago.
Yeah.
And the hypocrisy seemed to show up more in the Palestinian-Israeli. I don't see the hypocrisy. I don't see the influence, the negative influence of the United States on other countries. I mean, we have imposed our will. Shah of Iran's a good example in the name of protecting our democracy. So I can see how we're viewed as intruders, and we'd like to get involved in too many things. But I think that sort of cheering response is representing an emotional allegiance that goes beyond the pure politics of the situation. Yeah, we butt our heads into the politics of other countries, but there's usually a compensatory amount of money donated, and that the people don't see is taking place behind the scenes.
Also on the diplomatic level. Well, you said a feeling of payback and hope. So taking into the future, what's the hope going, from the moment of 9/11 onward for people who feel that way? I mean, we can bring them down?
Well, let's revert back to an individual, okay? And a condition called depression. The worst components of the depression are feelings of helplessness and hopelessness.
Sure.
Everyone's been depressed. It's a common cold of psychology. But the helplessness and hopelessness are the two components that stand out in the deepest depressions.
Okay.
People deal with them in different ways. Police officers very frequently, when they're depressed, become paranoid because they believe if they could catch their wife cheating or they could find out I was doing this, at least they can do something. Okay, it's a pseudo sense of power. Okay, so when you take a group like the Palestinians, where nothing they do seems to be working,
okay,
the depression has to be one of hopelessness and helplessness.
Okay,
so you fall back on people like Hamas, who supplied them with food and all that stuff, and you form a bond with them.
Give you some hope, and they show some power, too.
Yeah, that gives them a little hope in them. And then all of a sudden, boom, someone hits the great United States. Yes, then they get some feeling of hope, some feeling that something can be done.
Hope that America will be brought down. I mean, is that...
That's when I'm not quite sure I agree with is the motivation of the majority of the people,
then
that America will be brought on. Hope that there will be a change that allows them to correct any bad situations they have in life. You see, why do they want to bring America down so badly? Because we're all infidels? That's what Saddam Hussein's goal, states his goal is. And that's not even Saddam Hussein. I'm sorry, I'm bouncing around. That's what Osama bin Laden says, okay? They want to bring America down.
Yeah.
That's Zawahiri talking.
Yeah.
I don't believe that's the motivation of the average Muslim. Let's bring the United States down. They want the United States to back off on supporting some governments that seem to result in the suppression of them and their ability to, live a good life. And so it's more like, let's change the policies. We hope that the West will change the policy, but now they're equating the people of the United States with the policies of the United States. And that's what we're seeing happening in Iraq now, is this little change in the attitude of the people from before accepting that the people of the United States were separate from their policies. They are now beginning to identify the people of the United States as mixed with the policy, and that's a bad situation. Why would they want to bring us down? Because we have a good life, maybe. But it's not because we're infidels.
But again, blaming us for their problems, for their rulers, for their societies.
Well, that's fine to some extent.
It's sort of the great, it's the great Satan, and you've got to...
Sure, we have groups today that sit there and say, well, the reason I'm where I'm at is because of what was done to my great-grandfather.
Yeah.
And that's the reason I'm doing this, is because my great-grandfather was beaten up.
Yeah, was a slave.
It's too bad.
Yeah.
Do something now. And if it is do something now, and there are impediments placed in their way that are unjust, then it has to be addressed, my opinion. If it's just they're going to sit there and say, I'm now making the they just an amorphous group, that's get up and do it, okay? And we talk about discrimination in education. What's left out are the statistics that the ones that purportedly are discriminated against elect not to go to school.
Yeah.
Well, then we're supposed to say, we being the rest of society, oh, wow, we're not doing it right in school.
You're not going to school.
Yeah, you're not going to school.
Yeah.
But it's a nice excuse to blame the schools and say, gee, you got a poor school system.
We do have it here, and we've got it here in America a lot with blacks. Blaming, still blaming slavery. Whatever, stick it to the man, loot, whatever, destroy your neighborhood to get back at Korean shop owners or the whites or the Jews or whatever. You get a sort of a release, you make you feel good. I don't know what.
Sure, I think those are all emotions that you're going to see in any society. So there'll be people that blame the United States for the demise of their culture, and but I think most people are just... Well, I can't say that I think most people. I think there's a stratification of motives. There's some that are fully committed to this war against the infidels, whatever that is, all right?
Whatever it means.
Whatever it means.
Yeah.
There are those that are jealous of the United States and how we make things happen. There are those that object to the fact we're not as fundamentalist and dogmatic as their religion dictates you should be.
Not like that.
And therefore, by implication, either they're a fool or we're the infidels. I think there's a spectrum of...
there's a threat there, isn't it? Actually, that sort of relates to... They're threatened by somebody being different. Maybe.
Sure.
That their own self-identity and belief in their way of life maybe gets threatened if anybody else is different than them.
Sure. And then you have the others who are just bitching. The prisoners, Abu Ghraib, were hollering about abuse of the Quran. Yeah, we know they were using it as toilet paper themselves.
Gitmo,
But they realize, the Americans are very sensitive about that.
Can use that.
Well, my Bible says, thou shalt not kill Tom Evans.